Hey guys, welcome back to Pro Tools 101. Last week, we saw how we can use Pro Tools with different kinds of hardware, whether we have an external interface or whether we want Pro Tools to identify and use our internal sound card. We can control which interface Pro Tools should use using the Playback Engine window, which can be found under the Setup menu. If you're on a Mac, you can tell Pro Tools to use a Pro Tools Aggregate Io, which allows you to combine multiple interfaces into one. That's because on a Mac, the microphone and the speakers get identified as two separate interfaces. The Mac OS thankfully allows you to create aggregate inputs and outputs, which combines multiple interfaces and presents them as one to the software that needs to use them. Hence the Pro Tools Aggregate Io. If you're on Windows, you can use the ASIO driver to tell Pro Tools to use your internal sound card in a similar fashion. If you're using an external sound card or an external interface in Windows, you may or may not need the ASIO drivers because usually the drivers that come with the interfaces do the job that's needed. So from the Playback Engine window, you should be able to drop down and select directly the hardware interface that you have. It should show up in the list over there. So selecting that will allow you to use the external interface directly with Pro Tools. We also saw how we can create a click track, which is one of the most important things that are needed for every music production project. You want a timing reference whenever you're making music, and Pro Tools gives you much more than just a timing reference. You can customize the click to your heart's content. You can change the sound itself, you can change the volume of each individual tick. You can change the meter, the tempo, in such a way that you can have multiple clicks and each person getting a click sound can have his own customized sound. So it's quite unique. The metronome button that we have in our transport, please remember that that only turns on or off the click if and only if you already have a click track or if you have an aux track with a click plugin in it, which is basically what a click track is. But Pro Tools is one of the very few DAWs that allows you to have multiple clicks and allows you to customize the click for each and every iteration of the plugin. We also did a little bit of recording last week. We saw what a whole file is. We saw what a subset clip is. We saw that every whole file has a corresponding file in the audio files folder. Every subset clip does not, because subset clip are only basic edit information. It's start point and end point information within a whole file audio clip. How can you identify them? Well, if you look at the clips list, you will see that some of the clips in that list are in bold. All the clips that are in bold are your whole files, which means they will have a corresponding file in the audio files folder, either a WAV or AIFF file format, depending on what your session settings are. Subset clips are listed in the clips list, but not in bold. We also saw multi-track clips in the clips list. So if you see a small triangle before the name of the clip, that is a multi-track clip. If you expand your clips list, it will even give you in brackets the number of channels that multi-track clip has or the multi-channel clip has, right? So if it's a stereo file, you will see the name of the file and in bracket stereo, telling you that there are two channels within that multi-channel clip. We saw how we can rename and delete these clips as well. Renaming has two choices. You can either rename the clip only for Pro Tools, or you can rename the clip inside Pro Tools and on your hard disk as well. When you're deleting clips from Pro Tools, or when you're clearing clips from Pro Tools, you have three choices. One, you can choose to just take it out from your Pro Tools session, but the file will still remain in the audio files folder. Two, you can take it out from Pro Tools and you can move it to the trash or your recycle bin if you're on Windows. And three, you can tell Pro Tools to get rid of it forever. Please do keep in mind that that is not something that you can undo. If you move the file to the trash, you can always copy it back. But if you do the delete option from Pro Tools when you select clear, there is nothing that you can do to bring back that particular file. So be very careful when you use that particular option. In today's class, we're going to move on a little bit more. We're going to talk about how we can import different kinds of media into Pro Tools, especially audio and video media, because that's what we're going to work with most. But there are a few things that we need to keep in mind before we can import our media. One, we need to understand what we are importing. And two, we need to understand where we are importing as well, which means we need to take a look at our session configuration and our session settings so that we are aware of what Pro Tools is going to do to the files when we are importing them. We'll take a look at that in a bit. We're going to see the different ways in which we can import our audio. We can use the import audio dialog box. We can use the Workspace browser. We can just click and drag. There are many ways in which we can import our audio, and I'll show you each of them so that you understand how each of them actually makes a difference to the file that is being imported when you do an import. We'll also import video files, right? So let's start. The first thing we want to check when we are considering importing anything into Pro Tools is we want to ensure that we understand what our session is capable of doing. If you recall, I did mention that Pro Tools can work with audio only in two formats. Pro Tools can work in the WAV file format or in the AIFF file format. So if I try to import an audio file that is not a WAV or not an AIFF, which means, let's say I want to import an MP3 file, Pro Tools will convert that file to whatever I have set my session to be. How do I know what I have set my session to be? If you don't remember what your session is set to be, you can always check your session parameters by coming up to the Setup menu and then going to Session. Over here, you can check the audio format. As of now, my session is set to be the WAV file format. My sample rate is set to be 48 kilohertz and my bit depth is set to be 24-bit. And I have the interleaved option checked. That's another thing we're going to look into in a little bit more detail today. Which means if I try to import an MP3 file, Pro Tools will automatically convert my MP3 file into the WAV file format. If I try to import a WAV file, Pro Tools may or may not need to convert the file during import. When I say may or may not, it's because Pro Tools will need to convert the file if the sample rate does not match. The thing to understand is when you're working in a DAW, all audio files that you play back in your DAW must be of the same sample rate, because otherwise they will not play back at the same speed. My session is set to 48,000 Hz, but if I try to import a file that is 96,000 Hz, that audio file has actually been recorded with more samples per second. But if I play back that file at 48,000 samples per second, it means Pro Tools is actually going to play that back in half the speed. So if it's a 1-second audio clip that has been recorded at 96,000 Hz, if I play that back in this session without converting it, Pro Tools will play that 1-second audio file over 2 seconds. That's because it's playing back at half the speed. I'm playing back only 48,000 samples per second instead of the 96,000 samples that it has been created in. Now, if I play back something at half the speed, what do you think is going to happen to the sound? The pitch is going to change as well. That means it's going to sound much lower in pitch because I'm playing it at a half speed. I'm going to stretch out the sound and play it back at half speed. So Pro Tools cannot play back audio files at multiple sample rates without conversion. You can import the files without conversion, but then it will play back at the wrong speed and in the wrong pitch. So when you are importing audio files, that is one thing that we need to pay attention to. We need to check the sample rate and the bit depth of the audio file when we are importing our audio files. You don't need to check it from outside Pro Tools. In fact, Pro Tools will tell you whether the sample rate is a match or not, but you just need to keep an eye out so that you click on the right buttons. When it comes to bit depths though, Pro Tools can play back audio files with multiple bit depths without any conversion, which means my session is set at 24-bit. I can import an audio file at 16-bit and I don't need to do any conversion at all. Pro Tools will just play back the audio file fine. Similarly, if I'm importing an AIFF file, Pro Tools will not need to convert the file as long as my sample rate and my bit depth match. So because my session is actually set to the WAV file format, just because it's WAV and I'm importing an AIFF, Pro Tools will not ask me to convert, because technically AIFF and WAV are pretty much the same thing. It's just two different extensions and two different ways in which the same data is stored on the hard drive. So for Pro Tools, both of them are native formats. Pro Tools will not ask you to convert a WAV to AIFF or AIFF to WAV unless there is a mismatch in the sample rate, right? When Pro Tools will ask you to do a conversion is when you try to import it from another audio file format, like an MP3 or an AAC or MPEG-4 file, or even an MXF audio file. So when you do try to import any one of those file formats, since that is not a format that Pro Tools can natively edit in, Pro Tools will ask you to convert that file to WAV or AIFF. In this case, it's going to be WAV because my session is set to the WAV file, right? So let's take a look at how we can actually import our media into Pro Tools. The first way to import audio is to use the Import Audio dialog box. I can get to that by coming to File, going to Import, and selecting Audio from the submenu here. I have created some of these files just for the sake of practice, and I have shared these files with you via Moodle. So if you'd like to download these files and practice along or use the same files for practice later, feel free to do so. So amongst the files that I have created for import today are a mono audio AIF file, an MP3 audio file, and two stereo files, one interleaved and one non-interleaved, right? So let's select the first one first. So I'm going to go with the mono audio AIFF file. And over here, once the file is selected, I get to see the specifications of the file. I see that it's an AIFF file. I see the length of the file, the size of the file, the bit depth of the file, which is 16, the sample rate of the file, which is 44,100 Hz, and the number of channels in this particular audio file, which is 1 because it's a mono file. I can audition the file, which means I can preview the file by clicking on this play button over here, like this. I can change the volume of the preview by using this slider over here. So let's bring it down a little bit and then preview again. Now, if I'm sure that this is the file that I want to import, I can see that Pro Tools gives me a couple of choices. Firstly, Pro Tools is highlighting the Convert button for me. It means Pro Tools is actually recommending that I convert this file when I import it. Why does it need to be converted? It needs to be converted because the sample rate does not match my session. If you recall from our session settings window, our session's sample rate is set to 48,000 Hz, but this audio file is 44,100 Hz, which means if I do not convert the file, Pro Tools will not play it back at the right speed. The other choice that I have is to add the file to my session without conversion. But if I do add, there are two things that are going to happen. Firstly, and most importantly, Pro Tools is going to import the file without doing a sample rate conversion, which means the file will play back at the wrong speed for me. It's going to play back at a faster speed because Pro Tools is going to play back 48,000 samples per second. But this file, which is 5 seconds long, is going to play back at 44,000 samples in 1 second, which means it's actually going to play back more samples in 1 second than what the file is made in. So instead of playing 44,000 samples in 1 second, the 44,000 samples will get played in lesser than 1 second. So my entire 5-second odd file will play back in a little over 4 seconds something, right? So it's going to play back faster. And if you play back a file at a faster speed, it's also going to sound a little higher pitched, right? So the ideal choice that you want to do is what Pro Tools is recommending you do over here, which is to convert the file. Let's convert the file for now and then see what it sounds like. And then we'll do it the other way as well and do a comparison between a converted file and a non-converted file. So for now, I'm going to say convert. And when you do convert, because you have to do a sample rate conversion, Pro Tools allows you to choose the quality of the conversion also. I'm not sure why you would want to change the quality. You should always go with the best quality, which is the tweak head or the slowest quality possible. I have never done a low or a good or a better or a best for that matter, because it does not take that much time to actually do a file conversion. So always go with the best quality of conversion and then say done. When you do that, Pro Tools will ask you, where do you want to put the converted file? When Pro Tools does a conversion, it means it has to create a new WAV file in the new sample rate, and that new WAV file needs to be stored somewhere. By default, logically, it should store it in your audio files folder, which is where Pro Tools is asking you to confirm whether it's okay to save it in that folder. I see that this is the correct folder that I wanted to save it in, so I'm going to say open, and Pro Tools will import the audio file by converting it for me. Once the file is converted, I have a choice. Do I want Pro Tools to put the file for me in my clips list, or do I want Pro Tools to put the file for me into a new track? I don't have a track, so I'm just going to say new track for now, and then I'm going to say OK, and Pro Tools will put the audio for me into a new track. Let's play this and listen to it. Cool. So this is the way you actually do a conversion. This is the way you do an import by doing a conversion to match the sample rate of the session that you're working in. Now let's see what happens if I try to do the same import, but I do not do a conversion, right? I'm going to use a shortcut to bring up the import audio dialog box, which is Command-Shift-I. When I bring that up, I'm going to choose the same file over here, but this time, instead of hitting convert, I'm going to say add. When I hit add, apart from just importing the file without conversion, another thing is actually happening over here. Now, when I did a conversion, I could tell Pro Tools where to put the converted file for me, and it allowed me to put it in my audio files folder, which means if I went to my Finder and I check my audio files folder for my session now, I will see that Pro Tools has put the mono audio file over there for me, right? But now, since I have selected add over here, Pro Tools is not going to copy the file into my audio files folder. In fact, it's going to reference the audio file in its original location, which means if I take my Pro Tools session and I go to the studio and I open it up over there, Pro Tools is going to look for this monoaudio.aiff file in its original location, which means it's going to be on the desktop of my computer, because that's where this file is as of now. But my desktop files are not on the computer, are not on the desktop of the computer in the studio. So when I open this particular Pro Tools session in the studio, if this file is not on the desktop of that studio, Pro Tools will give me an error. Pro Tools will say, I can't find the file. So that is what you need to keep in mind is going to happen when you click on the Add button in the Import Audio dialog box. Whenever you add a file, Pro Tools will always reference the file in its original location. It does not move it to the audio files folder. And even if you move it manually later on, Pro Tools is not going to find it because Pro Tools did not do the moving, you did the moving, right? So it's really important that you make sure you import your audio in the right way. So I have selected add over here, and because I'm not doing a conversion, it does not give me the choice to do a sample rate conversion over here. So I'm just going to say done, and Pro Tools pops up a warning. It says one or more of the files you have selected to add have a different sample rate than the session. I know, my session is at 48K, this audio file is at 44.1. It's also telling me that these files will play back at the wrong speed. Do you want to continue? I'm going to go with yes for now, just to see what it sounds like. So I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to put it into a new track again. I'm going to say okay. And now you can just, by looking at the files, you can see that the green file, which is the file that we added, is not the same size as the blue file. The blue file is the file that got imported after conversion, which means it's going to play back at the right speed and at the right time. But the green file is not going to play back at the right speed. Let's listen to the original file again first. I'm going to solo this track and I'm going to press play. right? That's what it's supposed to sound like. Now let's see what happens when I added the file. That means it's going to play back more samples per second than what the file is intended to be played back at. It's faster. It's slightly higher pitched as well. That's because it's playing back 48,000 samples instead of 44,100 samples per second. And if you look in your Finder window in your audio files folder, you will see that the file is not there. The file is only in its original location, which is in my Import Media Practice Files folder on my desktop, right? It does not get copied over into my audio files folder. So whenever I open this particular session on any computer, Pro Tools is going to look for this particular folder, this particular file in that specific folder on my desktop. And if it can't find my desktop, Pro Tools is going to give me an error, right? So this is why you need to do a convert when you're importing your audio file. Let's try importing another audio file now. I'm going to select an MP3 audio file. Now, because this is an MP3 audio file, Pro Tools cannot just add the file to the session. Why? Because MP3 is not a native file format. It has to be converted back to AIFF or WAV. And in this case, it's going to be WAV because my session is set up with the WAV file format, right? But I get to know all of the other details as well. I can preview my MP3 file again from here. And if I like it, I'm going to say convert. I'm going to keep my sample rate conversion quality the best, and I'm going to say done. Pro Tools will again confirm where I want to put the converted file, which should be my audio files folder by default. It will always show you the correct location when you are importing audio files, and it has to copy or convert the audio files and put it to a proper location. So I wouldn't really change that even by mistake, right? I'm going to say open, and Pro Tools will import the audio file. Again, I'm going to say, okay, move it to a new track, and I have my audio clip over here now, right? So let's listen to this audio clip. Cool. So that's what happens when you import an audio file which is not in the native format. If you look into your audio files folder now, you will see there is an mp3 audio.wav file, not an mp3 file, because Pro Tools had to convert the mp3 file to a WAV file, and that converted file gets created and stored in the audio files folder because that is the location that you set when Pro Tools was importing the file and converting the file for you. Now let's try importing a stereo file itself. So I have a stereo interleaved audio file over here, which is the AIFF file format. The length is almost around 10 seconds. I can see that the bit depth is 16-bit, but the sample rate matches my session. The sample rate of this stereo file over here is 48,000 Hertz. Now, since the sample rate is a match and the file type is okay, Pro Tools does not need to convert the file for me, which means Pro Tools is telling me that I can just add this file to the session and it should work fine. Because I don't need to change anything, it will play back fine. The file format is okay and the sample rate is okay, so there's nothing that's going to stop Pro Tools from playing back the file in the way I want it to be heard. But if I select Add over here now, Pro Tools is going to reference the file in its original location, which means, like I said before, it will always look for the file on my desktop, right? Which is not something that you want. So when you are importing an audio file and the sample rate and the file type is a match in Pro Tools, it's always highly recommended that you select Copy instead of selecting Add. When you do Copy, Pro Tools is going to copy the file from the original location to your audio files folder when you do the import. Now, on the left side over here, you would have noticed that Pro Tools is showing me many more clips that are there as part of this one audio file. If you look really carefully, the icon for each of these is different. When you see this icon, this is basically indicating a whole file clip. And this icon, that is without the rectangular box around the waveform, is indicating a subset clip. Now this particular WAV file, let's actually listen to it. Is a 4-bar loop. Cool. So technically, I can see that there are 4 subset clips over here, 4 subset stereo clips over here, left, right, left, right, left, right, and left, right. So if I wanted, I could actually import any one of these subset clips or just one of the bars. So if I just wanted the 3rd bar, for example, over here, I did not want all the 4 bars, I can just select the number 3.L and number 3.R, and I can tell Pro Tools to copy only that particular bar for me. So if you did not want the entire 4-bar loop, you could select only the bars that you wanted. Of course, this subset information needs to be created beforehand in Pro Tools, and then the file needs to be saved with that information embedded into the file. So it's not like Pro Tools is automatically detecting bars and beats for a song and then showing you all the bars by itself. This is a file that was specifically created for this example. That's actually something that Pro Tools allows you to do. So if you have like a 10-bar loop, you can identify different sections of that particular WAV file and then save that subset information within a whole file audio clip. So when I take that one WAV file and go to another studio or go to another Pro Tools session, when I import, I can import the specific parts or the entire file depending on what you need, right? So you could choose to import just the subset information, or you can choose to import the whole audio file. I'm going to go with the whole audio file, and I'm going to go with copy because I don't want it to just reference the location. I don't want it to always search for the file in some other place. So when I hit copy and I say done, again, Pro Tools is going to ask me, where do you want to copy the file to? And by default, it will show you the right location, which is the audio files folder of your current session. I'm going to say OK and open, and put it back onto a new track. There we go. And I have my 4-bar loop over here. Let's solo this and play. Cool. Now, if you noticed, in our session settings, we did see that our session is set up to work with interleaved audio files, not non-interleaved audio files, right? Which means when I import a multi-channel audio file or when I record a multi-channel audio file, Pro Tools is going to create one file for me with all the channels inside that one file. So when I imported the MP3 audio file, for example, over here, it did a conversion. And when I did a conversion, even though in my clips list, it shows me MP3 audio.L and .R, in my audio files folder, it shows me only one file called mp3 audio.wav, right? Now let's see what happens if I take off the interleaved in my session settings, right? So I come back to my session settings and I turn off the interleaved and I close this button, I close this window. I go back to my import audio dialog box, and now I'm going to select the same mp3 audio file. I'm going to say convert because it's an mp3 file. And I'm going to say done. And now again, Pro Tools is going to ask me, where do you want to save the audio file? And I'm going to leave it at the audio files folder. I'm going to say open. And I'm going to say, put it on a new track for me, please. Now I have a second mp3 audio.1 file, which is the second time I have imported the file. And in my clips list, again, I see mp3 audio 1 stereo. And I do see that it's got a .L and a .R. Now, if I look in my audio files folder, I will see that there are 2 mono files over here, mp3 audio1.L and .R. These 2 together are my stereo audio file. It's the same as this mp3 audio.wav. In fact, let's take a look at the file sizes that we see over here. So I'm going to select all 3 and I'm going to do Command I for it to show me all the file sizes. I can see that my mp3 audio.wav is 1.3 megabytes. And if I come to the .L, it is 640 kilobytes. And the .R is also 640 kilobytes. Which means if you add both of them up, it pretty much gives you the same storage space on the hard disk as the mp3 audio.wav file, right? So as I said, it's not interleaved or non-interleaved is not something that takes any more space, right? In fact, it makes absolutely no difference to the sound within Pro Tools as well. So if I play back this file over here, it's going to play back the exact same way as the first MP3 import that I made. The only difference is the number of files that get created. So when you're actually managing your files within Pro Tools, it's easier to manage when you have lesser number of files rather than having more number of files, right? So why is it needed? Why is it important? Or when is it used? Non-interleaved is primarily used mostly, or rather I have used it more when I'm working in surround sound projects, which means when I'm working with 5.1 or higher number of channels, because then you need to be able to deliver the final product in individual channels. So, the producer or the producers of the film or the show that you are actually mixing will expect to receive individual speaker outputs as individual WAV files. That's the only time that I actually have worked with non-interleaved sessions. When you're working in music production, 99% of the time, I would recommend working in interleaved itself, right? So we go back to our session setup, and I can enable interleaved and close this window. Oh, by the way, you can go to your session setup using the shortcut Command 2, and that is 2 on the number keypad, not the 2 on the on your number row above the not on the QWERTY side of your keyboard, right? So Command 2 on the number pad will open up your session setup window for you, right? Next, let's say I wanted to import an non-interleaved audio file. So I'm going to go back to my import audio dialog box, and over here now I'm going to select the stereo audio file, which is saved as a non-interleaved audio file. So I have the .l for the left and the .r for the right. So I'm going to select both because I want to import both the channels as one audio file. And I'm going to say copy again because I don't want to add it. And it's giving me the choice to copy because the sample rate matches my session. And I'm going to say done. Now, when I import the file into Pro Tools, when I say put it onto a new track, Pro Tools will put the audio file for me in a new track over here. And if you look at your clips list over here, you will see that Pro Tools has automatically identified it as a stereo file, right? So even though you are importing non-interleaved files, if they have the .r and the .l behind their names and the rest of the name is exactly the same, Pro Tools will identify them as being one stereo file and will automatically show it to you as one stereo file in your clips list, right? So these are things that you need to keep in mind when you're importing your audio file. The most important thing is the sample rate. When you're importing audio files of multiple formats, Pro Tools will ask you to convert them to a format that is native to Pro Tools, which means it's got to be WAV or AIFF. If you are importing WAV or AIFF, unless the sample rate is different, Pro Tools is not going to ask you to convert the file. But if the sample rate is different, Pro Tools will recommend that you convert the file. You can add the file if you want, but Pro Tools will not play it back at the right speed and in the right pitch, right? When you are importing audio files of compressed formats like MP3, AAC, Pro Tools will most definitely ask you to convert the file. It cannot play it back otherwise. You can always preview your audio files from the import audio dialog box. We can also import audio from our Workspace browser, right? So if I want to open my Workspace browser, I come to Window, go to New Workspace, and I say Default, right? And from here, I can either search for the file using the search bar over here. I can do an advanced search by clicking on the plus icon with the magnifying glass. And I can tell Pro Tools to show me audio files with a sample rate that is greater than 44,100. And these are all the audio files that I have with sample rates that are higher than 44,100. So if there is a particular sound that I want to hear, let's say I wanted to import this sound effect that I have over here, I can preview these sounds by just clicking on this small play icon over here. And if that is a file that I like and I want to import, all I need to do is click and drag it directly into my clips list, and Pro Tools will import the audio file for me. Now in my clips list, I see the sound effect over here, right? Now, I'm not sure what the sample rate and bit depth of that particular file was, right? So am I sure that it is part of my session? Has Pro Tools copied it into my audio files folder for me? Let's take a look. The file is called Sci-Fi Explosion. So if I take a look at my audio files folder over here, I see that Pro Tools has not copied the file for me, which means the sample rate was a match with my session, and Pro Tools did not think that it was important to copy the files for me. This can be a problem, right? Like if you're going to use your workspace and continue to drag the files, you want to make sure that all your files that you use in your session are always part of your Pro Tools session itself. There are two things that you can do to prevent this problem. One is when you are in your workspace browser and you want to import an audio file, always use the Option key, right? So when you use the Option key, let's say I want to import the small explosion file that I have over here, and I hold on my Option key and then click and drag the audio file to my audio files into my clips list, Pro Tools will forcefully copy the file into my audio files folder, right? Now, if the file needs to be converted, that means if the sample rate is not a match when I click and drag from my workspace browser, Pro Tools will always convert the file without asking me, right? But if it is a match, make sure you hold down the Option key and then drag from your workspace browser. Or another way to do that is to go to your Pro Tools preferences. So come up to the Setup menu, go to Preferences, and go to the Processing tab and turn on Automatically Copy Files on Import. So when this particular option is turned on and you hit OK, whenever you drag and drop a file into Pro Tools, whether you do it from the Workspace browser or whether you do it from outside, when you drag and drop a file into your Pro Tools session, Pro Tools will always copy the file instead of adding or referencing the file for you. So if I come back to my Workspace browser, and let's find another file over here. Let's say I have this Fireburst file, and I want to import this Fireburst file into my Pro Tools session. I'm going to click and drag into my clips list. And now I see the file in my clips list over here. And if I go to my audio files folder, I will see that the file has been copied as well, right? So make sure that setting is on. By default, that setting is actually not on. And I feel that setting should always be on. So whenever you click and drag any file, it will always copy the file for you into your audio files folder instead of referencing it in its original location, right? If you wanted to create a track automatically when you imported your audio files, let's go back to your Workspace browser. And let's say I have a music file over here that I want to import, and I want to put it on a new track. There are a couple of things that you can do. Well, first of all, you can just click and drag it directly to the gray area over here, and Pro Tools will automatically create a track for you. Or drag it to your tracks list over here, and Pro Tools will automatically create a new track for you with that particular audio file. All right? So these are the different ways in which you can import your audio. You could drag and drop your file directly from the Finder or your Windows Explorer window as well. But you always need to remember, if the sample rate does not match, Pro Tools will automatically convert the file for you. If the sample rate does match, Pro Tools will not convert the file for you, and it will add the file only, which means it will always reference it in its original location. So to make sure that it always copies the file in the audio files folder for you, please make sure you go to your Setup Preferences, go to the Processing tab, and turn on Automatically Copy Files on Import. When you turn that on one time, it will always be on for every session that you work on, right? That's a system setting. It's not a session setting. It's not something that changes per session. It's something that is going to change the way Pro Tools works on your system itself. Right? The next type of media that I want to show you how to import is video, because audio and video, these are the two types of media that you're going to be importing the most. Pro Tools can work with video files. Pro Tools is one of the most used softwares for post-production as well. So for sound design And for film mixing, it's usually only Pro Tools that works really, really well. Pro Tools can work with QuickTime Video and can also work with a couple of different formats from Avid as well, especially the MXF format of video files. But Pro Tools works perfectly fine with any QuickTime Video format as well, as long as it's encoded in the right codec, right? So if you do get a QuickTime MOV file or an MP4 file or an M4V file, as long as they're encoded in a codec called H.264, it should work absolutely fine within Pro Tools. For Pro Tools to be able to work with video files, we need to enable something known as the Video Engine from the Playback Engine window. The Video Engine is what allows Pro Tools to process the video file, right? So to enable the Video Engine, I come up to the Setup menu, go to Playback Engine, and I turn on the Video Engine. Say OK. It may take a couple of seconds, depending on your computer's speed. And once that's done, I can go ahead and import my video file. I import my video file by coming up to File, Import, Video, and I select which video file I want to import by going to Video Files. And I have two video files that I want to use as examples over here. So I'm going to select the QuickTime file first and say Open. And Pro Tools gives you a couple of choices. Now this window that pops up when you are importing your video file will look different if you're using the standard version of Pro Tools and if you're using Pro Tools Ultimate. This is what we will see because we are all using Pro Tools Ultimate. But if you're using the standard version of Pro Tools, you will not have so many choices. That's because the standard version of Pro Tools does not allow you to import more than one video file. Because we are using Ultimate, we can have multiple video files. We can have multiple video tracks, which is why Pro Tools gives me the choice of putting my video file either directly into the clips list or I can make another track with my video file. If you already have a video track in your Pro Tools session, Pro Tools will also enable the first option over here, which says Main Video Track, and ask you if you want to put the file directly on that track itself. I do not have a track, and I don't want to put the file in my clips list directly, so I'm going to let it create a new track for me. If your video file also has audio, like in this case, this QuickTime file that I am importing does have audio, I can tell Pro Tools to import the audio from the file as well. And once I say OK, Pro Tools is going to ask me where should it store the audio file that it is converting and importing from the video file. By default, it'll show me my audio files folder, which is the correct location that I wanted to save the audio from the video into. So I'm going to say Open, and Pro Tools will import the audio and the video file for me. There we go. I have my video file. This is my video window. If you do not see your video window, you can always come up to the window menu and then say Video, or you can use a shortcut, which is going to be Command 9, but the 9 on your number keypad, not the 9 on your QWERTY keyboard, right? So you can show or hide your video window by doing Command 9 on the full-size keyboard, on the number keypad. Let's close the video window for now. I can see my QuickTime video file over here, and I can see the audio that got imported from my QuickTime file as well over here, right? So I'm just going to solo this track and I'm going to play it back just to preview. Cool, right? So that's one way of importing your video file. But the thing to pay attention to over here is, now if I go back to my session folder in Pro Tools has created a folder called Video Files for me. But if I look inside over there, I will see that the QuickTime file that I just imported is not there. In fact, the QuickTime file is still in its original location, which is in the Video Files folder from the files that I shared. It has not copied over into the Video Files folder itself. That is because Pro Tools will always reference the video file in its original location. Even if you import another type of video file, for example, if I go to File, Import, and I go back to Video, and this time I select the Avid MXF video format, and I say Open, Again, Pro Tools is going to give me the same kind of choices that I had before. I can import it directly into my main video track itself, but I already have a video file there, so I'm going to put it on another new track. I'm just going to say OK. Pro Tools has imported my video file for me. So I see the video files over here, but if I take a look at my video files folder within my session folder, again, it is still empty. Pro Tools will never copy the video files for you into the video files folder. Pro Tools created the video files folder only so that when it records video or when it creates a video file, Pro Tools can put that particular file that it creates within the video files folder. If you have specific video hardware, Pro Tools actually allows you to capture video directly onto a track as well. And when Pro Tools does that, that is when it creates a video file in the video files folder. So unless you are actually recording video, Pro Tools will never put the video for you in the video files folder. So this is the one exception where you should be doing file management instead of Pro Tools. So if I'm working on a video project, what I usually do is I usually copy the video files that I am working with into my video files folder and then import them into Pro Tools, right? So I do it before I import, not after I import. So when I import it from my own video files folder that is inside my session folder, whenever Pro Tools launches next time, it knows exactly where to look and it will find the video files for you every time you load the session. Because we're using Pro Tools Ultimate over here, let's close the video window for a second. Because we're using Pro Tools Ultimate over here, as I told you, we can have more than one video track, and we can see that I have more than one video track over here. I have my QuickTime video file over here, and I have my MXF video file over here. But the thing to understand is Pro Tools is not a video software. Pro Tools cannot play back both these video tracks at the same time. Pro Tools can play back only one video track at a time. Which one will it play? The one that is active. You see this blue O button over here? This is what activates a video track. So now when I press play, Pro Tools is going to play the video from this track. If I want Pro Tools to play back the video that is on the MXF video file track, I need to activate this track by clicking on this O button. The O button is an online button. It's basically telling Pro Tools which of these video tracks needs to be online. So when I make this video track online, the QuickTime file video track will automatically go offline. So the video that's going to play back now in my video window is going to be the MXF file and not the QuickTime file, right? So that is how we import video into Pro Tools. There is one thing that you need to bear in mind. If you are using macOS Catalina and you are using an older version of Pro Tools, which is 2019.12, I don't think any of you are using that version because the version that you got is after 2019.12. But there was 2019.12 was when the time 2019.12 was released. That was the time QuickTime became 64-bit, and there was an issue with all other softwares trying to use QuickTime's codecs properly in order to play back video. So there was, a couple of months where we were not able to import video from Pro Tools, import QuickTime video using Pro Tools. So, but that's been resolved. So I think if you're using Pro Tools 2020.3 or 4, 2020.4 or above, you should be okay. You should not have a problem in importing QuickTime video. The latest version, the most current version, the one that we are using over here now is 2020.12, which is what you also should be having, right? So if you are trying to import a video file and you see a problem with importing video file, it's because of QuickTime. So try updating your Pro Tools or try updating your Mac OS. But don't update it to the new one. Don't go to Big Sur. Big Sur is not yet compatible with Pro Tools. It's not going to work fully. It will work, but it will work for learning. You will not have a problem when you're learning Pro Tools. But if you're trying to do a big project, there will be a few hiccups here and there. All right. You can also import only the audio from a video file. So if I bring back my import audio dialog box, I can actually select the video file which has audio and tell Pro Tools to import only the audio by hitting convert. Usually audio in a video file is stored in a compressed format, so it does have to be converted every single time. Even if it is not stored in a compressed format, because it's enclosed in another format, it will still need to be converted by extracting it out from the video file, right? So if you wanted to import audio from a video file, you can still use the import audio dialog box and select the video file and then hit convert and done, and Pro Tools will import the audio from a video file. All right. So that has been it. That is how we import different kinds of media into Pro Tools. Multiple ways in which we can do it. Command-Shift-I brings up the import audio dialog box. You can use the Workspace browser. You can search for the files that you want using the Workspace browser, either by sample rate or bit depth or file type. Just click and drag. If you click and drag to the tracks list, it's going to automatically create a track for you, or you can click and drag to the clips list if you just want to import it and not use it in a track immediately. If you want to import it and make sure that Pro Tools always copies the file, please hold down the Option key and then drag it from the Workspace, or go to your preferences, and under processing, you can enable automatically copy files on import, so that every time you click and drag a file into Pro Tools, it will always copy the file for you. Things to keep in mind in the import audio dialog box: if you are importing a file that is not the same sample rate as Pro Tools will ask you to convert the file. If you don't convert the file, it's not going to play back right. It's going to play back at different speeds and different pitches. So that's not something that you want to do. If you are importing a file that is of the same sample rate, Pro Tools will give you the option of adding the file, which is not recommended. It's recommended that you copy the file so that all your files are always in one location always. If you add the file, Pro Tools will always look for the file in its original location, which can be a problem if you move the session from one computer to another computer, or if you decide to open the session on your friend's computer or in the studio, then Pro Tools will not be able to find the files for you, right? And you can import audio files from different file formats. You can import MP3, AAC, that's MPEG-4, WAV, AIFF, obviously. You can't import some formats like FLAC is not a format that you can work with. Basically, Pro Tools will import anything that can be played back using QuickTime. So if it can play back in iTunes, Pro Tools can import it. Think of it like that. What else? Video files. Pro Tools can import again a video file that can be played back in QuickTime, or using one of Avid's own codecs, which is MXF is an example. I have shared all of these files that you have seen here today with you via Moodle. Feel free to download them. Feel free to play around with them, learn how to import them, try all the different ways in which you can import them, and hopefully you'll be able to practice well, right? That is the end of Chapter 6, and thank you for your time. I will see you guys next week. Bye.